if a member brings a union into disrepute and the union disciplines and maybe finds that they have to expel him from the union, okay, I understand that in most unions a member can appeal, right? Now, if a member appeals and the appeal process arrives at the same conclusion, now this is a hypothetical situation, but the member is still not happy. What can a member do? Does the CCMA play a part in a role in that at that point?
Yeah, correct. I think CCMA and Labour Court, to the extent they can intervene in terms of dealing with dispute going forward.
A dispute between a member. What I mean is a dispute between a member and the union that they're a member of.
Correct. Remember, it's an issue of interpretation of the Constitution and the and what that person has been charged. If you are saying you are expelling me on something that is unconstitutional, let me make this point. Remember, all the unions are being registered based on the requirement of Department of Labor. And Department of Labor has a framework of the Constitution. And one of the framework is the issue of saying any member cannot be expelled because of he didn't join any strike that was sanctioned by the union. Let's say the union has a strike, and subsequently one member says, I'm not going on the strike. Then when we come back from that strike, we say, now you are ill-disciplined, and subsequently we are disciplining you and subsequently expel you. I'm talking about those kind of scenario. That person can go to CCMA or Labour Court in terms of interpretation of the same Constitution that we have expelled that person to say. But in terms of the Constitution, you don't have a right to expel that person.
And when you're saying the Constitution, you talk about the Constitution of the country.
Union.
The union, not the union. Okay.
Yes. But remember, the Constitution of the Union must be consistent with the Constitution of the country.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. Here, I'm basically going to be asking you questions that relate to NEDLEC's Code of Good Practice, right? I found this document, for me, interesting because it distinguishes between an employee and an independent contractor. And then, from my point of view, this distinction is unnecessary. And I feel that it is this distinction that actually disempowers the employee in the employment relationship. But we can get down to it. To start off, what would you say, from your point of view, is the distinction between an employee and an independent contractor?
Look, my man, I can tell you one thing. What was the objective of NEDLEC then? Was to regulate labor broking. Hence, they arrive at that point to say there are independent contractors going forward. But, well, in so many ways, it did make sense to say, because they are saying contractors are those employees that have been employed who are working for a specific period for contracts. Let's say this person is working at ESCOM, they are building a power station, then their contract is for 5 years. It makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah, so I think it was intended to specifically deal with that theme. But we know employers are taking advantage of that space going forward to say, even somebody who's not an independent contractor, who is an employee, but they will just say, no, this person is an independent contractor because they want to exploit.
Okay. So you're saying it's actually better to be an employee than to be an independent contractor? Basically what you were saying, because I think it cut yesterday while you were busy speaking. And you were basically saying, that distinction came about as part of the endeavor to sort of limit or rein in labor brokers who were busy exploiting workers at that time by giving people 3-month contracts. and then after that letting them
Yes.
go because the contract were finished, were complete, or they ended. So you're saying,
Yes.
Ori, they basically made a difference so that they could force labor brokers to then have to hire those people permanently after that, not just have them as
Correct.
okay. So basically, considering that context, it was actually better to be it is actually better to be an employee than a independent contractor.
Yeah, correct. Because when you look, especially in terms of skills, né? Usually independent contractors are those people who have skills like electricians, plumbers, who are working for particular specific time frame in terms of the project. Né? But when you're working like in an area where it's post office, it's a routine working environment whereby each and every day you'll still have to do that kind of job. It does not end there. So I think if you are skilled, I can say maybe that maybe you can be remunerated much better than maybe independent contractor can work for you. I've seen many people in private sector whereby they just provide their skills in terms of maybe this thing of power stations, the tower and everything. We find many people with different skills, but they know this is something that will end at some point. It's a project in itself.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand. So basically, you're saying, okay, usually independent contractors are people with those sort of hard skills, the sort of STEM skills, electricians and plumbers and so on and so forth, right? So those people also, would you say that, I mean, normally they work for, because if you're talking about an independent contractor, you could speak about an individual as well as meaning a natural person or a
Yes.
company or a business. Right.
Correct.
Yeah. So people with those skills could be working for those kinds of businesses that become independent contractors in their relationships with their clients when they become subcontractors on things like construction projects and so on. Would you say that makes sense?
Yeah. If you look, many of independent contractors, they come via labor broking companies. Né? This is where you'll find that labor broking company they will just register and subsequently they will come via them. But these are the people who are working for particular specific time frame. But I think in terms of ordinary workers who are working a routine work, the challenge with them is that you'll find that a specific company needs to maybe upgrade or do whatever. It needs specific type of people to ensure that they deal with this thing. And once they deal with them, then they return to their routine jobs going forward. So you are correct when you are saying even if independent contractor can be an individual or a company itself, with the current scenario in South Africa, you'll find that many independent contractors are coming via a labor broking companies in so many ways.
Okay, so these would be individuals coming through a labor broker to work on a project for a defined period of time.
Correct.
Okay, so and we're talking. So then you have in that situation you have a different kind of a problem. It's not a problem of they work for short periods of time, but there's other ways of exploiting them, like paying them less money, right?
You're correct. The challenge with a project is you'll find that these people are doing something outside their critical skills. So let's take an example of Eskom. Ne? Eskom at some point decided to build, I think, 2 power stations, Kusile and Mudupi. Ne? And in that, I think they acquired skills of boiler makers and riggers and other people, you see?
Yeah.
These are the skills that are outside Eskom's competency in terms of the skills. So you'll find that maybe a labor broking company and the Eskom subsequently come into an agreement to say, we are going to pay you this much, and subsequently then you'll see how you pay your people. You are correct in that thing when you say it's possible also labor broking companies will still exploit those people because it's them who are hiring them because they are coming through them going forward. So exploitation will always be a factor in these things.
Okay. So now, with regards to the NEDLEC code of good practice, some of the sort of characteristics they use to distinguish an employee from an independent contractor. There's, when I was reading this, firstly I felt worried, they're unjustified, but I want to just test my thinking as to whether or not it makes sense. One of these characteristics is that an employee cannot have sort of more than one job, right? They cannot sort of have more than one vocation at a time. You get hired at a place, and that's basically where you work. Whereas an independent contractor can work on multiple sort of service level agreements at the same time. Are you aware of this? Firstly, do you agree with that characterization in terms of my understanding?
Look, I think it goes to an issue of hours of work, ne? Because this is one thing that is very critical in terms of basic conditions of employment. To say employee must work minimum, I think it's 42 hours per week, maximum up to 162. I think the issue of this thing of not working more than one employee, maybe it's an issue of trying to, I'm not so sure because we are not in NEDLEC, ne? So I think the issue of not working more than employee is to ensure that your current employer will just give you necessary hours of work, and then also you must rest also. I'm not so sure. I'm just thinking aloud what can be the answer. But when you look at the world of work currently, I think the world has changed. Even the world of work has changed, whereby you'll find that when one employee is working for different employers going forward because of the nature of the work they're working. But in South Africa, I think we are not yet there.
Can you? I'm not sure. I'm aware, because the way that I understand how with you referring to how the nature of work has changed, my thinking is that you're referring to the work at home, working from home situation, things being more online. What do you mean?
No, not necessarily. You'll find that. Let's say in many countries they have relaxed some of the these issues of hours of work, and subsequently you'll find that somebody's working 4 hours this company, 4 hours this company. It's no longer an issue. They are now saying flexibility. It's a major issue going forward. And hence I'm saying, especially when you look at first world countries like USA and Britain, these are the kind of things that they are practicing currently. But in our country, I think we are still where we are, whereby we are saying one person must work one work going forward, and subsequently, if there is any other work, maybe that person must also indicate to the company that they are working so that they can check whether it does not infringe on their working conditions or they are not clashing in terms of the interest going forward.
Is this something recent? Because I don't think I've come across it. How recent would you say it is, this sort of trend?
It's there, but it's very, very minimal. I can tell you, it's very minimal. You'll find that those who are in higher positions are exploiting that space, especially when it comes to, even though it's not explicit employment. You'll find those who are in managerial positions, they will also occupy what positions somewhere.
Okay, that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Yeah, but they have to indicate as such in terms of, because it also clashes with their work. You understand? Because at some point, the meetings of the board will find that they are happening during the working hours of these people. So these are the kind of things that we are talking about.
Is there a chance that what you're talking about also when you talk about these trends overseas, is that a possibility that you are referring to also the gig culture? This thing of I have a job, but on the weekends I do Uber or I do Bolt or something. I'm a driver. Is that something that you possibly are referring to?
It's happening. I can tell you, it's happening. It's just that many people don't declare. They always say we must declare, but many people that don't declare, you find them as and when they knock off, they are going to another job going forward because the legislation and the restriction of employer will limit them in such a way that employer will just think that if you can manage to work this time and subsequent work for that employer, which means from where you are, you are not giving me 100% efforts in terms of doing your work going forward. Hence, people will always try to find a way of maneuvering in terms of those kind of things. But they are working. I know many people who are working dual jobs in so many ways, especially in post office.
Okay. Some of the other distinctions that I remember, or characteristics that I remember, they talk about, actually you alluded to it in terms of the hours of work. Mara, mainly what they're talking about is the degree of authority and in a way control that a potential or that an employer has over the employee's time. Well, you see, whereas with an independent contractor, control is really most dictated by the service level agreement as a contract between the two of them, which then it means that the the independent contractor has more control than an employee in terms of what ends up in that contract, right? Because I mean, if you look at the service level agreement, it's similar to an employment agreement in terms of just discussing the terms of employment and the conditions of employment, right? And for example, deciding work hours and how long and so on and so forth, right? But an employee has less leverage in their negotiation with the employer, whereas an independent contractor, being that they can actually subcontract on multiple projects at the same time because they themselves are a business usually, right? But even if it's an individual, I mean, they can they can then dictate, this is when I'm available, this is when I'll be able to come, and so on and so forth, and then have to negotiate. So my point is, it goes back to that, to say that this sort of, because it seems to me like it is a restriction to say employees are not allowed, right? They're not allowed. And in fact, in certain company policies, it is a fireable offense. You see, that to find out that someone actually has a second job, but even something like, for example, an independent contractor being a business, like if they're doing my garden, they can bring anyone on any of the days where they're supposed to do my garden. As long as it's the same company, they can bring different people, right? This is putting aside customer service issues, all right? Just because they work for the same company, they can bring different people. But an employee, when I've hired an employee, the employee cannot send someone else that they know who also has a skill to do their job on their part, and then they will share the salary. I pay the employee. I don't pay anything extra. You see what I'm saying? And I'm saying that these restrictions to me don't really make sense, and they seem to make sense only with the agenda to disempower the employee relative to the employer, to give the employer more leverage and therefore less power in that relationship. What's your take on that?
No. I think you captured it so nicely. I can tell you one thing. I think when we spoke yesterday, we even indicated that it does not necessarily mean that the playing field is level. Hence, there are this legislation to ensure that they are protecting employees from brutal exploitation of employer. Employers will always try to find a way to maximize profit, and they will always find a way to marginalize the employees going forward in terms of ensuring that their space is not open in such a way that they can do many things in their own space. But also, I think it's also coming back to the economic framework of our country. If our country has managed to absorb many people in a workplace, and people are not so frustrated in getting jobs or being in jobs also, I think that was gonna also open options going forward. Because with the current situation, if somebody is working for post office, that person will not allow himself to share his salary with another person, even if he can have many commitments. Because of the little that he gets, he will ensure that he'll cling on to that to ensure that he gets something. Because our economy has not been open in such a way that people can have options going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you say it like that, it makes sense. Not I think though, if you look at it backwards, right, where if I'm an employee and it's already sort of normal and part of the economic culture for employees to be able to do that, right? By the time you invite me for an interview for the position, I probably would have already been going to other interviews, because it's already okay to be involved to have my fingers in multiple places at the same time. And therefore, an employee as an individual becomes a business, right? Where they leverage their relationships and connections with people, with their peers who have the same skills, to get access to opportunities and share resources. So yes, I come to you. Now, what happens is, now I come for the interview, I have less fear of losing the job because the opportunities are high. And therefore, the less fear I have, the more leverage and confidence I have to speak for myself and represent my true value, right? The value that I see that I'm worth, right? And obviously, I won't get from you my true value. That's the whole point of negotiation, you see. But essentially, the whole point is to put me on a better footing when I sit down with the employer. And because right now what's happening is the relationship is one-sided, socially, economically, legislatively, but also, legislatively, yes, employees have protections, but, the recruitment process, like you and I have already highlighted, it's not sufficiently covered. It covers equality sufficiently, in my opinion. Equality is quite well covered. Not equality, I mean equity. I meant equity. Equity is well covered, yeah. But equality isn't well covered. And remember, I mean, the law is not enough to govern a country. I mean, the law, at the end of the day, is just a piece of paper. It's just a set of rules, made wherever. It's really the culture, our way of life. And economically speaking and professionally speaking, the way of life is, you come to the interview, keep quiet, only ask and talk when you're spoken to. You are the inferior agent or the inferior person in this whole endeavor, in this whole activity. So, okay. One thing I'd like to
maybe one thing that we must also indicate. I don't think interviews are good indicators of the strength of individual. People comes in interview based on different circumstances. I think we spoke about that yesterday. Even somebody might come to interview knowing too many things and being competent, but because he wake up not in a good space that day, somebody might say that person is bad. You see? So I can tell you, interview is not a good barometer to measure a competence of individual.
Yeah. You can't. I mean, that's why they even say the CV itself as well. It's not really a good indication. You have to meet the person, but also when you meet the person, you have to sort of meet them under the right conditions. Make sure that you have the time. That's why it's better to spend more time with people. Exactly. Yeah, that is quite interesting. Maybe the interview needs to be re-looked at. Do you have anything in mind? Would you have anything in mind in terms of improving that part of the process?
I think I know companies will always talk about budgets and everything, but remember, you are dealing with different people, and you are dealing with those who are being called introverts and extroverts. And then nature will tell you, it's so hard to crack an introvert in terms of understanding their way of thinking. you need some time to ensure that you understand that person. So for me, a process of assessments can go a long way in terms of many companies to ensure that you assess this person in terms of maybe scenarios, a competency test, and everything. Even interview, if it can be put in a mix, but it should not be a something that will be a make or break it.
Yeah.
You understand? It should form part of processes of a recruitment processes going forward. I think it will help to ensure that you are going to bring the best out of whatever you have interviewed going forward.
I think that is an amazing idea. That I think that would work. And actually, my practical sort of imagining of that idea, sort of the realistic version would be businesses maybe working closer with schools, and sort of taking a positive spin on the concept of grooming. Normally when they talk about grooming, they talk about an adult trying to take advantage of a child, to raise them, to manipulate them and use them in some way, right? Usually sexually. But in this case, we're talking about, a company maybe pinpointing. Obviously, this is not completely new, but I think it's not as in depth as you and I would like it to be, in order to sort of get to know the person, see the child develop, and also sort of more like influence their path in a way that they've already chosen to better develop them. When they reach that point where they're ready now to be taken in, then you then bring them in. They're already sort of on the fast track because they're already familiar with you and your business and your company and so on and so forth. So I think, I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense.
I think it also goes, let me extend it a bit. It shows you also where, in terms of the kind of leadership or character of leaders that we always chose also in our country. Because we always think that those who are talking too much are those who are good in terms of being leaders. And then, but subsequently with time, we'll find that those who are not talking, in fact, these are the critical people that we need in an institution to ensure that they endure those kind of pressure and direct the institution in a correct way. So I think also it's a culture also and mentality in our country to say, those who know how to speak, it looks like these are the correct people, but I think practicality has shown us many ways to say it's not that way in so many ways.
Well, I don't know how to feel about that because I kind of talk a little bit when I'm around people, but I understand. Actually, I do understand what you mean. I think mainly you're referring to sort of the political types where politics is a career for them. It's not a calling. So I think I understand what you mean there. I'd like to just touch upon the concept of employee engagement, as it is used by employers in the workplace. What is your familiarity with that concept, and what is your point of view of that concept?
It will depend on an institution. Sometimes people are throwing nice words as a strategy in the workplace to say we are an open organization. We also have this employee engagement to ensure that we understand our employees in terms of where they want this institution to go, and we are listening. But I can tell you, in many ways, employers don't listen to employees. Employees are the ones who are in a cold phase, who knows what is happening in terms of operations. When they tell manager to say, what are you coming with in terms of policy and the strategy is not working? Practicality of this thing is happening this way. Because this person is not a manager, and then somebody thinks that this person, what he's talking about, is not something that has been well researched and everything.
They don't think they're qualified to speak.
Exactly. Then we'll find that employee engagement in so many ways, it's a bit of a phrase that has been thrown, but without even following it up in such a way that once you get opinions of employees, whether in terms of where the company is going, what are the bottlenecks in terms of implementation, and then how do employees feel also. You'll find that employees have many views or feelings about particular type or the way company is dealing with particular things. But I can tell you, management will not do anything about it. They will not even come back next year to say, we have listened to you in terms of the issues that you have raised. We have researched it, and then we found it maybe it's true or not. Then subsequently, we've taken 1, 2, 3, 4 measures to ensure that we rectify.
Yeah.
That is not happening, unfortunately.
Your answer really hits the points on the nail. Because they really hit the head of the nail, because that's the whole point. Like pretending to make change, pretending to sort of drive progress, when actually in the meantime, because employers can even set up these events where they say we're going to now uncover all these issues and discuss them and sort them out once and for all. And then you have all these workshops where you bring ideas and you submit and you raise your issues, but then at the end of the day, nothing changes, and then the next year they'll say they'll have another one just to keep appeasing.
Same thing.
Yeah, it reminds me of sort of the the greater the greater political and economic situation we have right now in South Africa. So every 4 years we keep pushing voting, dreaming, and then we basically come back down from the clouds again. So,
but it's unfortunate. I don't want to lie.
Yeah,
some of us as Black people, we are looking at ourselves. It's so very, very hard to say, but are we proving other people that we can manage this country? It's so painful. I don't want to lie. Issues of this country. Some of us, when you talk about them, I don't want to lie. It's so painful. Because we are failing to manage simple things, state-owned entities. Eskom, Telkom, Dinel, Transnet, SAA, all of them, where are they?
So, what do you think? At the root cause, what do you think is the connecting tissue behind this sort of incompetence that we see? Is it incompetence? What is it? What is that's driving that? Would you say?
I think it's political. I don't want to lie. This one we need not to beat about the bush. It's a political. Our political principles at some point made bad decisions. They were putting their people in the strategic positions, and some of the people don't care. They don't care to ensure to drive the institution to achieve its goals or strategic objectives, because they know that I've been put here. I've not worked in such a way that I can say I've deserved to be here. I don't mind if other people, there are those and it's exceptions whereby these are the people who have been deployed by their political party and they are excelling in particular portfolios. But I can tell you, many of them, whether you start at the board level, executive level, and management level, even ordinary employees, you bring people who already have arrogance of their political party to say, you must remember, I've not been hired here. I'm here on behalf of my political party. So when you drive these things like changes and ensure that you are professionalizing the institution, these are untouchable peoples. Once you start you want to deal with this person, you'll go to his political party and they'll be defended. So professional people will just say, for me, it's a waste of time. Let me leave them. Maybe let me go with the flow.
And do you see this manifesting in the same way when it comes to, because you can't really separate union issues, meaning issues of workers, which are, economic issues, but economic issues are ultimately political issues. In fact, all issues ultimately are political issues, in my opinion.
Correct.
So would you say that, this kind of, I wouldn't say, let's just call it incompetence. Do you say it manifests in the same behavior? Yeah. Would you say that it manifests in the same way in the union space in general?
I can tell you one thing. It will depend on the nature of the unions and the strength of the union in the particular environment. Some of the shop stewards or employees who knows that their unions are very strong, they will always scare management with their unions to say, I don't want to do 1, 2, 3, 4. If management come and say, why can't you do your job? I'll call my union. You see? So it's a bit of an issue of employees at some point don't understand what is an objective of the union. Objective of the union is to ensure that company generate profit, to ensure that conditions of those same employees are being enhanced in such a way that they are being better. Because without any profit from the company also, it's a challenge to ensure that the conditions of employees are being bettered also.
Do you mind switching on the light there for you in the
okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay. One last question. This is the last question. You know, I've done about this is about the 10th interview now with union, working on this union story. And you know, one of the challenges that I faced, aside from the usual difficulties, you know, whenever you try and connect with people, it can be difficult because they also have their own things going on, and you know, you have to sort of find a way in which you can connect. So, but one of the challenges I faced is that, you know, there's a reluctance. As once I identify myself as an independent journalist, there's a worry, you know, and sort of I kind of understand where that's coming from in terms of that justified distrust of the media, right? For myself, being an independent journalist, I'm not working for anybody, but I'm still a journalist, and therefore there is that worry that they have. What is this worry? Is it the worry that, look, if I'm going to interview you, even if I assure them that they're not speaking in their capacity as representatives of their unions, you know, of course that distinction is artificial. You know, if you work for a union and I invite you, yes, we can say online, you know, in the record that you're not representing the union, but I mean, you're still associated with your union, you have a relationship, and therefore that association is there, right? But my question is there fear, not their distrust of the media, that I'm already aware of and I kind of understand. It's part of the reason why I'm actually sort of independent rather than, you know, trying to work for one of the houses. You know, is what is the other reason on the other side? Are they fearing sort of victimization from the structures?
I think it might be a serious issue because once you are coming to them with interview and maybe you are going to ask them in terms of union issues. Unions are organizations too. They've got their own weaknesses, ne? And then you'll find other people are tapping in the issues that is the leadership in other structures will not be so comfortable with those kind of responses from individuals that have been interviewed. Maybe it can be one thing, but also I can tell you issue of you'll find that people are also not comfortable to talk about union stuff, even including their employers. They don't want to anything that will associate them with those kind of things because at the end of the day, they'll find a bit of a backlash going forward. Maybe lastly can be an issue of hierarchy or communication structure to say any communication should go through General Secretary or Communication Department or PR if there is a PR going forward. But I'm not so sure if they have not indicated as such to say, I've got an issue, I'm not the one who can be able to deal with this interview, but I'll give you somebody. For me, I'll say that it's a fair approach going forward.
But do you see how this goes back to this? Because, I mean, we do understand these people are elected into these positions. We're talking about, you know, elected representatives of the union. They are elected, but being now elected, one could say, without being technical, that they are also sort of employees of the union because they, you know, now they've been elected to function, you know, to perform the duties that benefit and that advance the interests of the union. But do you see how it goes back to that? So if I'm working, I mean, if take an employee for example, I work for a company, and I work as a plumber for this company. Now, am I allowed to go and do an interview about the plumbing industry without talking specifically about my employer, right? And therefore discussing, things that might not even be there might even be corrupt in the industry, some of the failings and so on and so forth. And therefore, what kind of backlash can I face for speaking about the industry in a certain light, even though I'm not directly speaking as a representative of my employer, and I'm not even speaking in my capacity as an employee of that employer. So again, for me, this highlights just the kind of restrictions that employees have that independent contractors don't have. Because they come to that negotiation, the establishment of that relationship as a fully realized and fully acknowledged entity. I said that was the last question, but I'm just worried about what would you say, and just maybe this would be your closing statement. Just speak on the safety of members, especially when it comes to threats of violence from their fellow members when it comes to things like strikes. The reason why I'm asking you this, you reminded me. I watched a video on Facebook now where it looks like there was a strike for truck drivers, and they pulled out one of the drivers from the truck, and this is a video of them recording this. And this guy's got a shambok with him, right? This guy's about my age, and he's talking to a man about your age. You look like you're old enough to be my uncle, and he's talking to him like he's a little boy. He's got a shambok, and he say, "Yeah, manje zokshaya manje," And I'm thinking they're going, but you guys are members of the same union, and you are basically a youth, and this person is old enough to be your father. So what's going on here? So can you just talk about what unions in general can do about that? And where that is coming from?
Look, this one, I don't want to lie, it's a serious question. Remember, unions, when they sign recognition agreements, even labor relations are clearly indicating that unions have a right to strike.
Yeah.
And that is the only strong bargaining tool that the unions have if they are deadlocking with an employer. But also critically, what is happening in an event whereby the unions and employer deadlock and subsequently there is a strike, the legislation also indicates that a right of employees who do not want to participate in the strike should be also preserved.
Okay.
They must not be victimized. They should not be done so many wrong things to ensure that their rights are being protected. But here's the critical thing. I think also that from where some of us we are sitting, I think the legislation has lost it. It also indicates that in terms of issues of how do you go about issues of strike and everything, and then once you on a strike and subsequently engage management and they review their offers, and then maybe you have been given 2%, management indicated such, maybe in terms of reviewing their offer, we are now giving you 10%. That 10% that management is going to give you, it will be across the board. Across the board literally means even those who are not on strike are going to get that 10%. So this is where the major issue is, to say, Tina, we are fighting for you, but Nina, you are at work. But when we get anything also, you are also going to benefit the same way like we are benefiting. But some of us, we are sacrificing our salaries. I think this is where our legislations, I think it's losing it. Hence, you'll find there will be always workers against workers in terms of this thing, because if it was very clear to say, if those who are not interested to go on strike, it's fine. But they must know that they will be noted, and then once these ones can win whatever they win, then subsequently that will not filter to them. one thing, it was going to push them to act as a collective, or those ones who are not interested, they will know what will be the consequence, correct? I can tell you, it's a deliberate legislation to divide workers going forward. It does not help at all, I can tell you. It's a deliberate effort to divide workers, because they know that many workers will always have serious financial issues. Losing 1 day money, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Some of them is not an issue of they don't support strike, but they are in a serious need of money. They cannot afford to lose 1 day money. Hence, they decided to continue working. Hence, they understand what are the issues.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, even for the employer, it puts the employer in a certain situation, because if the workers who don't want to strike still come to work, that obviously buys favor with the employer, because the employer didn't want the strike in the first place, right? But then now, if the employer gives the 10% to the workers that are striking and doesn't give it to the workers who bought favor with him or her, then it goes against the employer in terms of the employer's interests, because now the employer will feel like they are not rewarding loyalty. Do you see? So you are striking, I'm not striking, and now I go, my employer is grateful, thank you to me. But then when you succeed, you get the benefit and I don't get the benefit. So I think you are right. Now, the way I see it, I think it is the employer protecting themselves from that kind of situation and sort of passing the buck onto you. But I think also legislation, like you say, it would actually help both sides if it was actually set up at a higher level where you can just both reflect what this is how it's supposed to be, and so on. All right, Ntate, those are my questions. Thank you so much.